Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just going to give it a minute or two for the few additional people to join.
Richard, there's feedback. I think someone else close to you has got their audio on.
I have resolved that it should be better now. Apologies for that.
Yes, it is much better. Thank you.
We'll give it a minute and then we'll get started. Right. Good morning, everyone. I think let me get started, and if people trickle in as we go along, then we'll go from there. So just I thought I'd introduce the session, say hello to everyone, and happy Friday morning. So yeah, I am Richard Verleysen. I'm the financial director at Winley. I'm joined by our Winley team here, who's Christina, our operational manager, as well as our ISO training company representatives as well, who are on the call, Carolyn and Megan Cunningham. Just so you are aware, the session is recorded. It will be a recorded session. So today I'd like to introduce Mr. Tony Cunningham, our Winley Managing Director, who will be talking to everyone today about the topic. I think it's really great that we have a attendance here today. Sorry, are we having some we're all excited to join, and I see we've got a little bit of a few extra mics in the room. So yeah, I think it's a good way, a practical way to look at ISO certification, what it means, and kind of looking beyond the myths, beyond the assumptions, and sometimes the intimidation reputation it may carry. The purpose of today's session is quite simple. We really want to demystify ISO certification for organizations at every stage of their ISO journey, whether you're beginning to explore it, already working with a management system, and so on. So we just want to we want to clarify what ISO does, what it does not, and what it does not require. So without further ado, I will introduce Mr. Tony Cunningham, who will take us through a couple of topics. There is a Q&A, but if you would like, you're welcome to put your hand up, come off mute, and we can facilitate questions as we go along. Right. Thank you all. Over to you.
Thank you, Richard. I'm going to share my screen to get going, and I'll reference the slides just for people to be aware. There will be a takeaway set of notes as well. And as Richard put it, there's also going to be a recording posted on our YouTube channel. So that will be available after the presentation. Richard, thank you for your introduction. Thank you to the team who's made this possible and contributed to all the work that's gone into getting people online. And of course, thank you to all of you who are participating and present in the room today. So let's, without further ado, get going on the topic of certification, reality, and myth busting. Richard, if you can confirm that my slides are showing, please.
Slides are showing and we can hear you well.
Thank you. Excellent. Right, then let's kick off. The idea of today is born out of many questions from companies who are either seeking certification or may already be certified, and they want to understand more about it. I want to say that Winley as a brand has been around for a couple of decades now, but as a certification body, we've been offering services since 2017. With the reason for launching Winley International Certification Body, with so many players already in the market, the idea was to act as a boutique certification body offering services where service quality was seen to be not that good. So I'd invite you to go onto our website, all of you, if you're looking at certification seriously, and look at what our clients have to say about us. Service is first and foremost what a certification body should be offering you. My background is one of starting out my career in the world of mechanical engineering, and standards, and particularly management system standards developed by ISO resonated with the precision and exactness in my mind of what engineering should be. So for my entire career, since early days, I've worked in the world of ISO standards. My field of expertise is best represented by my audit capability in the world of quality management, so ISO 9001. And my second standard, not as deeply understood, but certainly the next favorite is ISO 14001. Both standards we're accredited to offer certification for. So let's dive into the detail of today's presentation. Firstly, why do organizations seek certification to an ISO standard? Now, I want to start by positioning these ISO standards formally. There are tens of thousands of ISO standards in the market, the majority of which are focusing on a product characteristic or a method of some sort associated with a service or a product. Only a few of them, and when I say a few, we're reducing down from tens of thousands to about 100 management system standards. Management system standards, conformity standards, which I'll talk a little more about later on, are focusing on management arrangements within an organization. They're very specific around a particular topic. They could address management of the organization to achieve outcomes of regulatory compliance and to protect the environment, as is the case for ISO 14001 by way of example. So what we're seeing is with the increased regulatory pressure in different markets, first and foremost the European market, product regulation demands certain levels of conformity to protect the consumer who might be buying that product, to ensure that they have confidence in its use, that it's not going to blow up in their face or electrocute them or something of another nature that could harm them. So regulatory areas are essentially focusing on the safety and protection of the end user. In South Africa, for example, if you are to obtain a medical device, so maybe it's an invasive procedure where you have a heart defect of some sort and need a pacemaker. A pacemaker would be a regulated product, and the regulatory authority in our country is SAHPRA, and they would demand that you not only, if you're producing or manufacturing that pacemaker, that you not only get the product tested and certified to do the job that it's intended to, but that you also comply to ISO 13485, which is a management system standard. And that's the kind of approach that's spread across many different industry sectors, not only in the medical world. Our generic quality standard is ISO 9001, and that is what we might call the grandfather of all of them. It is the oldest. The work on that started mid-1970s. The first version published, not even called ISO 9001, in 1979, and eventually only in 87 did they change the name to something more recognizable. That being said, that underpins the work. The intent of the management system standard then brings focus on the topic. And I've already mentioned quality, environment. ISO 45001 is a management system standard dealing with occupational health and safety. The fourth one that I want to mention is ISO 27001 for information security management, a standard that is highly sought after these days and is growing at a rapid rate in terms of numbers of certificates. So, why certification? Well, the context around standards is changing. While the standards themselves might not necessarily change that much, the context around the standard and its use is changing. From a regulatory perspective, the regulations more often speak to one another in terms of corresponding to expectations and requirements. And one of the ways in which the regulators are provided with confidence and assurance is by way of certification. The same is true for supply chains. First and foremost, government tenders offer you more points for compliance with ISO 9, 14, and 45. More and more these days, included in that mix is ISO 27001. But the fact is that large players in the market, your big corporations, the entities listed on the stock market, the JSE in our country, will typically offer work to those who can demonstrate and provide confidence of these particular requirements, be it quality, be it environmental protection, and so on. ESG in reporting these days is a primary demand, and the expectation, certainly from a social and an environmental perspective, is that the organization influences its supply chain. So if they're a big company and they're buying from a supplier, whether it's a service or a product, they're going to expect that their value system is embodied in that supplier to protect them against the potential brand damage and associated risk of a supply chain that does not perform in a responsible manner. So already what you're hearing is that these standards focus on risk. They focus on business risk, and this is not per chance. The way that they are structured and the framework into which these standards are now written are influenced by the needs for good corporate governance. So if you think of the role players and the businesses that get funding through the stock exchange, be it South Africa, New York, London, the big stock markets of the world are expecting the top management are acting responsibly in guiding the organization to protect against loss through the inherent risks associated with the work that they do while seeking value for the shareholders. And so through strategic partnerships, ISO has incorporated good corporate governance into the requirements of these management system standards through the way that they're positioned and through the framework into which the writers of the standards, what they have to adhere to and provide as input to the content. I speak with conviction on that topic. I'm a member of TC 176. So the ISO TC 176 committee is a contributor to the content of ISO 9001, as well as a contributor to ISO TC 262. That's the risk guideline for ISO 31000. So when we prepare standards and contribute to these standards, the need is expected to fulfill certain requirements that are directed by the technical committees in ISO and the corporate structure in ISO, so that we don't only focus on the particular disciplines such as environment or health or safety or information security, but we focus on good governance per se, running the business in a responsible way, monitoring, measuring, protecting risk against risk events, and being able to report with confidence on the performance. So certification then is a third-party exercise where an independent body like Winley would come in, conduct an audit, and evaluate the conformance to the particular standard in the case of management system standards. And we'll talk more about the difference between performance and conformance a little later in this presentation. Now, one of the myths that we see far and wide is the myth that ISO and conformity to an ISO standard is all about the paperwork, is all about the documentation in the form of policy and procedure. And this comes as a result of the legacy systems that we see in the market, companies that started out in their efforts possibly a couple of decades ago, with 9001 being the first. It used to demand documented procedures to define the business processes and other arrangements. Now, I would defy you to find the word procedure in the current ISO 9001 standard. It may be there in an introductory note, but I want to highlight that there is no longer a demand for documented procedures in our ISO management system standards. That's an important feature because of this myth that people seem to think that we have to have excessive amounts of internal documentation guiding the work that is performed and regulating the business processes. In fact, the perspective is one where risk-based thinking is demanded, where under the planning clause of all the management system standards, demand that the planning is performed with consideration of risk and opportunity. What that means then is preventive actions are built into the control arrangements that speak to the business processes that could otherwise achieve an outcome that is adverse to what that standard is focusing on. Let me make the example of quality. If the outcome of the system is to achieve good quality product that agrees to what the customer and the organization have in mind, then preventive actions should be installed as control arrangements into the business processes of the organization to prevent those kind of risk exposures of non-conforming product and failures and weaknesses in the process and its controls. So it's not about the paperwork. We may generate a record to prove and supply confidence that we've performed the way that we planned things, but it's certainly not demanding that we have a procedure document to guide the people. And if you choose to introduce a procedure document, that's the choice of the company, not the requirement of the standard. And that might be news to a lot of people, but I'd invite you to take me up on my challenge to do a search on these standards and look for the word procedure, let alone documented procedure. We don't see those demands any longer. The next myth is around the cost, and I'll talk to that in a moment, but the cost is typically associated with either training people within the organization. Perhaps you might seek a facilitator to help you in the development of your management system. There could be a cost associated with that. And then, of course, there's direct cost for certification, which is ongoing, and we'll talk about how that works in a moment. Then the last point here in terms of myths, developing a management system for conformity to a standard takes months, not years. And certainly not days. The typical time frame is in the order of 6 months, thereabouts, and it depends very much on the size and the complexity of the organization and its business processes and numbers of people. So the real cost of ISO, let's dwell on that for a moment. There are the direct costs. As I said, there's an expectation in Section 7 of the standard that speaks to human and other resources in each of these standards. and the expectation is that there is competence of those whose hands get dirty with the work that could influence the outcome of the management system. So if you're looking for quality outputs from your business processes, the people that can affect the quality outputs would need to demonstrate competence. So there's a cost associated with achieving the competence and demonstrating the competence required for each of those portfolios. Equally, you might need to train a specialist within the organization, a specialist or two, to develop your system with you or to audit your system. We'll talk about internal audits in a moment, but they are best conducted by the people who are in the business. So costs then for certification, an accredited certification body, which I'd encourage you to use. An accredited certification body is bound to conduct a sequence of audits, starting with a two-part audit. So we refer to a stage 1 and stage 2 audit to get your initial certification. Beyond that, each year you would have at least one surveillance audit. Now, we have clients that have asked for two per annum. The reason being is they believe, and this is a learning point, they believe that their people prepare for the audit, and therefore it's around the time of the audit that their systems are reflecting best practice. After the audit, people start to relax and they revert back to perhaps poor controls and inadequate ways of working. So they ask for two audits in a year, which means they're in a preparatory process all the time, kind of thing. But the costs associated with it then can vary, anything from around 1,000 Rand per audit a day to roughly around 20,000 Rand per audit a day. And there's vast variation amongst the different suppliers of these services. So that's what you're looking at in terms of direct costs. The training, you could also pull in a consultant. I know that we've got consultants online. I saw some names. Welcome, Moses, an old friend. I know that the consultants charge a similar kind of fee per day as the auditors do. So you can figure out the associated costs there. But the direct costs are then those associated with training and development of your people, training and development of the specialists that will develop the management system, and perhaps you get some guidance from a consultant in that regard, and then the actual costs of certification, which are ongoing. The initial certification via a stage 1, stage 2 audit. And by the way, the time associated with that is also regulated by the International Accreditation Forum that accredited certification bodies have to adhere to. So stage 1, stage 2, that gets you certification. Beyond that, once you are a certified organization, at least an annual audit, and every 3 years a recertification audit, because your certificate for an accredited certification is only valid for 3 years. All right, so where does the cost come in? The cost comes in from those who are involved within your organization, optimizing your processes, developing, if you develop documented procedures, developing those kind of things, but more importantly, conducting risk assessments and involved in risk mitigation. So your management of your risks in these systems is probably where your people are going to spend the most time in preparing for the certification. And once you've established the system to conform, it's an investment that you've made to protect against those risk events that you've focused on in the development of your management system. Typical timelines, I think I've alluded to this already. It's not days in time, it's months, and it's not years. So anything in between, measured in months, would be a realistic time frame for developing and implementing these systems. What companies actually gain if they've done this correctly, my view is that they focus on business process, and they manage their processes to mitigate the risks associated with environmental impact, health or safety impacts, ill health, injury. They mitigate against incorrect production of products or services in terms of quality, or very expensive. They protect against loss of integrity of data. We know that cybercrime is probably the most prolific crime in the country at the moment. And so ISO 27001 ensures and gives confidence that the organization has done its best in protecting against those kind of cyber crimes. So that risk reduction is very much a real result of the outcome of implementing the management system. So the management team who's making a decision as to which standard to adopt should first ask themselves the question, what are the major risks that we face as an organization? And that then guides them on which standard to focus on. And as I say, there's about 100 of these management system standards. Some are more well used than others. And this most often will provide market access. So companies are saying, if you want to do work for us, you must demonstrate your performance by way of certification. And if that becomes a barrier to access that market, then you need to concern yourself with those standards and open the doors accordingly. What we've seen from our clients primarily is that the value they derive from these management systems is consistency in their business processes and protection against the risks that they believe should be focused on, and thus have used a particular standard as a framework to do so. What do auditors look for? First and foremost, and I personally, when I'm conducting audits, will start with the executive team. We'll talk to the CEO, the person in charge of the organization, and their immediate colleagues and reports, with the idea of understanding what their perspective is and how much they are committed to the particular standard and the system that supports it. The Harvard Business Review, and if you haven't subscribed to that, I would encourage you to do so. Coming out of Harvard Business School, there's a regular monthly magazine that they publish, and they publish studies that they've performed. One of the studies reflects on quality management, and what they found is where the messaging and the behavior of top management are consistent, the customers are happier. In other words, top management should not be approaching the development and implementation of any of these management systems by saying what should be done. They should be demonstrating and leading the charge. So direct involvement and, as I say, the messaging must match the behavior, and that builds confidence and the right kind of culture in the people reporting into that top team. What we're looking for then is commitment from the top team, and there's a section in every management system standard titled Leadership. It's section 5 in these standards, and it lists substantively the kind of things that top management should be involved in. We're also looking at evidence of control. Now, these standards that we're speaking of are all conformance-based standards. In other words, they set out the management arrangements that should be evident. And by managing the business processes better, we control the process and we assure that the outputs produced are within the parameters set. So the objectives of each process are then achieved consistently. And that's really what we're looking for, whether it's an environmental standard that we're auditing or any other. Occupational health and safety is true as well. It's the same activity performed within the process that should not harm the environment, should not harm the people, make them ill or injure them. And so the activities that form part of the process that convert the inputs into outputs of the process must be consistent in their control and the outputs that they deliver. So we use the performance outputs as indicators of conformity, but our mandate is to audit conformance. We're using the performance and the outputs according to the parameters and specifications that either the customer or the regulatory authority or the organization itself has set for that business process. And the outputs then are indicators of whether there is adequate conformance and consistency in that conformance or not. All right, red flags to an auditor. Firstly, over-engineered systems, where companies have placed extensive reliance on developing documented procedures, documented works instructions, and they assume that because they have the documentation, that the behavior will be consistent with that documented content. And we recognize that that's not necessarily true. It can be a support to the way that people work. It could be a single point of reference. So there's nothing wrong with having a procedure or works instruction. In fact, I encourage it. But the fact is you shouldn't place complete reliance on it. The people within the processes need to take ownership and take accountability of their obligations. And when they own the process and the dynamics of that process, they're empowered to make decisions. They're empowered to apply their mind to the situation that they face on a day-by-day basis. And the results of that are a culture evolves that protects against the inherent risks that we're focusing on, depending on what kind of audit it is. So we don't want a system that is simply developed in a sense, but not implemented. We're looking at implementation, we're looking at efficiency and effectiveness, and we're looking at risk mitigation. And anything outside of that may give evidence that the organization is window dressing. So we've got specifics that we look at in that regard. Why do companies fail audits? By and large, their failure is because of their poor internal audits. In order to prepare for a certification audit or a surveillance visit, the organization has to conduct its own internal audits. Its internal auditors need to be familiar with the standard that they're using as criteria and any other associated criteria, such as legislation or customer requirements or industry sector requirements that the organization has subscribed to. And the people within the organization know where the weaknesses are because they work in it. They day by day experience the nuances of the business processes. And so they are best positioned to find areas for improvement. And that's what the audit is there for, to help in ongoing improvement of the management arrangements. So poor quality internal audits where the auditors are not familiar with the criteria or perhaps are not familiar with the techniques of auditing can reflect badly when the external auditors come in, because that's really what builds your system. Those companies that rely solely on the external auditors to drive improvement for them are missing a trick. And the systems that work best, I've observed personally, are those that the supervisors, department heads, or the business unit managers, the people in charge of the process, or the group of the functional group, are the ones that know the processes best. And if you train them up as internal auditors, the people downstream in the end processes can audit those upstream and vice versa. And you'll find that communication improves and human behavior starts to come into play, where people make it a game and they compete with one another to see who can get the best outcome in an audit. And that really drives improvement in the system. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already adopted that kind of approach, to consider it. And then, of course, reliant on understanding the content and interpreting the content of a standard to conduct audits is important, but also in the development of the system. If there's been a misunderstanding there, then the incorrect approach could be taken, and the risk exposure associated with that error could then result in costly mistakes. So those are mainly the concerns around underperformance when auditing as a certification body, some of the reasons that we observe there. All right, if I look at our clients, and I might point out one, but the fact is we have many clients who reflect on what they've derived as value from implementing these management systems. The lessons that we learn is where top management are involved, they build a management system that reflects their strategy, that reflects their desires for risk mitigation. It's real, it's an integrated system that integrates into their management arrangements, their day-to-day work. It becomes what they do and how they do it rather than something else to do. So those are some of the key lessons. Make it real for your business. It's not about satisfying the auditors. It's about building value for your organization. And for that matter, your auditors, your certification auditors should be on that same page. They should be helping you improve your system for that reason. I want to then talk about certification transfer. And before we go into that, transfers are only legitimate and acceptable within the framework of accreditation. So there are International Accreditation Forum mandatory documents that guide how transfers must take place. Transfers can only take place between certification bodies that are accredited at a similar level. In South Africa, SANAS is a tier 1 accreditation authority. The other big accreditation authorities in our part of the world would be UCAS from the United Kingdom and DAX from Germany. The certification bodies under those three accreditations are most prolific in this part of the world. Now, what that means, if you read through, and the documents are freely available on the IAF website, what this means is that you can transfer from one certification body to another without an audit. The certification body is guided by the mandatory document to conduct what I might refer to as a due diligence evaluation of the other certification body. So the issuing certification body who's holding the certificate for the company seeking transfer, they need to be evaluated to ensure that they've fulfilled all the mandatory requirements for accreditation, namely that the sector code associated with that particular company, that they're accredited for that. So they have the necessary auditors with the necessary prerequisite knowledge of that sector present in the audits used and producing the reports. Secondly, the duration of the audit is specified for the given size and type of organization relating to the nature of risks and such like. So there are some specific conditions that the certification body is expected to adhere to that are spelt out when you conduct a certification activity. And it's the obligation of the receiving certification body to evaluate whether the issuing certification body has fulfilled all of those requirements before they accept that transfer. The transfer then, once that has been reviewed, is on face value. You had a certificate, you get a new certificate. You don't need to have another audit. Okay, that's what a transfer implies. So all of the transfers that we've been involved in have been as a result of, and I must say they're all big brand names that we've transferred from. We've received those clients as a result of poor quality of service, unresponsiveness. The auditors are not adding value in the audit. Those are the kinds of experiences that were out there, and it's one of the reasons that Winley International Certification Services was launched and initiated and brought to this part of the world. So if that's you, then a transfer might make sense. However, if the certification body that you have selected and are currently certified under has not done their job the way that it's called for, then we're obliged not to do the transfer, but to start with a stage 1 audit as if you were starting from the very beginning. Common pitfalls: before you transfer, make sure that all your corrective actions have been closed and that they've been accepted by your certification body. Otherwise, the same is true. We've got to start with a stage 1 audit again. So that's one of the big pitfalls. And I think the other thing is then if you've assumed that your certification is valid and it's in fact invalid for the reasons that I've stated, then after you've moved to another certification body who are applying the rules as they're meant to, you might find that you result in more non-conformities unexpectedly. So that's a pitfall as well. It's not about the number of non-conformities that are raised in an audit, but about the improvement that can be made to the management systems and the protection against risk. So that's the perspective. Nonetheless, we have to follow the rules that mandate our activities when we do a transfer. All right, what you should have heard in between the lines and explicitly stated is that certification to a management system standard, whichever one you've chosen, is not about satisfying the auditor. It's about managing your processes and mitigating the associated risks. So that's what we look for. What is the system delivering? Is it protecting the organization? Is it giving top management the kind of insight and the shareholders the confidence that they're looking for? So it's a real business tool in that regard. And if we're just acting as policemen rather than as real auditors adding value, we'll find it's a substantive process of looking for failures and being proud of the fact that we have a long list of failures that we've identified in the client system, and that really should not be the focus. We want to audit for conformity. We want to reinforce the areas of good performance and overtly state that to the client. Whilst, yes, there may be some weaknesses that we want to assist in guiding the organization to improve their arrangements. All right, what role does top management play? I know a number of you represent companies as leaders in your organization. So top management's role is to espouse or set the scene from the top, communicating and describing the value system relating to that particular standard that you're focusing on, so that people within the organization understand what is correct and incorrect and can behave accordingly. It's about making the right decisions to build the system for and with the people to help them in delivering their best work in every circumstance. So top management role is fundamental to the success of any of these management system outcomes. Then I want to talk about beyond certification. After certification, it's expected, and the words of each of these standards talk of the system being maintained and continually improved. What I want to say about that is, at the point of certification, some companies assume that that is a goal in itself, and they've now achieved the goal. They can sit back and relax, and things will take care of themselves. We're not looking at ongoing performance at and conformance at that level. We're looking for continual improvement beyond certification. So we're obliged to look at maintenance of the management system. So over time, it should be maturing, and then specific continual improvement. Section 10.1 and 10.3 both speak to improvement, and we're expecting that the management system shows evidence of improvement. So the proactive duty is to set objectives and implement change management to ensure that the improvements are embedded in the way that you work. And of course, there's also the reactive improvement as a result of corrective action, where we seek to understand the underlying causes of failure to remove those in order to prevent recurrence of such failures. So continual improvement is a definite thing that we will look at after certification. I once heard it said from a client that the certification is like the birth of a child. Yes, sir. Sorry, someone spoke. All right, I'm wrapping up. So if that's a time check, thank you for it. The certification is like the birth of a child. We cannot assume that that's the end of the road. That's the beginning of the road. And in fact, raising the child is probably sometimes the greater of the obligations and challenges, especially if you've had teenagers, you'll know this to be true. But jokes aside, the system is born as the child is when it's first certified, and it then needs to be raised to adulthood. It needs to mature and deliver the value that you've anticipated, having made this great investment in a management system. And that's the way the auditors will be looking at it as well. If the teams that have been involved, and it should be a collective involvement of the entire organization led by the top, relax after certification and withdraw their efforts and stop the focus on the important features of the management system, you'll find that it will start to revert back to lower levels of performance, and the inadequacies in the system will start to reflect in the outcomes that you experience. So what changes after certification? We go into a mode of monitoring, measurement, auditing, review, and evaluation that allows us to understand the performance and the conformance as a management team, and the auditors will reinforce that understanding and help you in creating the metrics and the mechanisms that reflect on the favorable outcomes as much as the unfavorable ones, so that your system can improve and add real-world value. I think that pretty much brings us to the end of my presentation. So I'd like to thank you all for listening, and you are invited, if you haven't already done so, to put forward questions. I know that Christina and Richard were catching the questions on my behalf and will be putting them to me in a moment. That doesn't mean you can't put more questions to us. I invite them, and it helps with the richness of our discussion. So please feel free. Richard, back to you.
Sure. Tony, there's a question here from Pretty. She says she wants to understand, after the 3 years of being certified, what happens. She's yet to do a second surveillance audit, and she wants to know what happens, post that 3-year cycle. They were certified in 2024.
Okay. Thank you for that question, Pretty. In response, the certificate is valid for 3 years. So there's a recertification audit every 3 years. In between that are these surveillance audits. So once you've been certified, within a 12-month period from that certification period. Rich, could you mute the discussion there?
Sure. Thanks.
Okay, just to go back into the answer, the surveillance visits should be once a year, and essentially they are a shallower sorry, they're not a shallower dive. They're a more constrained perspective. So the recertification audit, or the initial stage 2 certification audit, looks at the entire system against all criteria. So the whole business within the scope against all criteria of that standard and associated compliance obligations. From there, the certificate is awarded, and within a 12-month period, there must be a surveillance visit, which means that at least every 12 months, there's one surveillance visit in the 3-year cycle, and they constitute collectively a full re-audit of the entire system. So let's say there are 10 parts to the standard. I'm just taking a very simplistic approach now. Say there are 10 parts to the standard. You will apply 3 of them for the first year and take a deep dive into those requirements, a shorter audit, but looking more intensely at a fewer set of criteria. The next audit will audit the next 3 requirements, and the following audit in the 3rd year, we'd look at the last 4, for example. So we've got 10 different criteria simplistically that we've viewed, but we've taken a deep dive on each of the surveillances into that narrowly focused perspective on the system. Hopefully that answers you now. The results, if you have a minor non-conformity, all of the certification bodies are bound to classify the importance of their non-conformities that they raise. This is a requirement in ISO 17021, Part 1, which they must be accredited for, against, should I say. So if you get a minor non-conformity, there's no big deal. You can carry on trading the way that you were. You need to obviously address it, but you've probably got a longer period of time in order to address it, even up to the next surveillance audit. In terms of major non-conformities, a major non-conformity at any audit is threatening your certification. At the initial certification, you may not be certified if there is a single major non-conformity open. Beyond that, when you get to surveillance, if you have a major non-conformity, it's threatening your certificate. If you do nothing about it, you will be suspended. If you do nothing under your suspension, your certification will be cancelled. Okay, so you must respond to non-conformities always, and the major ones are deal breakers. If you have but one, it can result in you losing your certification. So that requires swift action. And I see Ambrose has a further question. I think I've answered, Richard.
Yep. Yeah, you answered the question. Thanks, Tony. So Ambrose has another question, is about how does an organization provide objective evidence as to the company's view and consideration towards climate change?
Okay, so one of the changes that's been introduced to the high-level structure, which is the framework into which all of these management system standards have to be written, under Section 4, there's been an amendment there that demands that climate change is considered by the organization. Now, if it's an ISO 14001 certification, you must have been living under a rock if you didn't address climate change. For all of the other standards, we are now bound to look at climate change as well. And possibly the easiest way of me describing this, the context of the organization under 4.1 requires a strategic review by top management to understand what the surrounding circumstances are. Climate change is something we're experiencing. It results in more extreme weather events. The droughts are drier, the storms are wetter, flooding results more frequently. So if you're, for example, an agricultural organization, you're reliant on the produce that is farmed and produced, then the droughts and the floods are going to affect that organization and should be taken into account to demonstrate that when you build or plan your quality management system or your environmental management system or your occupational health and safety management system, when you develop that system, you're looking at the risks and opportunities associated with that point that you've identified in the context. So let's say that the farmer identifies that drought is a significant risk to them. They may then opt to irrigate where they weren't irrigating previously, and that will bring about a whole lot of new business processes that they need to engage in, licensing for abstraction of water as a water use, and various other things. I think that is an example of what we're looking for. So the evidence typically would be in the form of some kind of a minute of a meeting or a register where the context has been considered by top management and they've reflected on these different circumstances that could either present risk or opportunity to them, and they act on that. They plan actions to deal with the risk or the opportunity such that the outcome of that particular standard can be achieved, and the related system, of course. So thanks for that question. I hope that that satisfies you. You can follow up, of course, and we can engage further. Richard.
Tony, I don't see any more questions. Chris, thanks for sharing as well. Thank you. That's very insightful. Thank you. I don't know if there's any more questions. You feel free to come off mute if you'd like to ask as well. We do have 3 more minutes. Right, Tony.
From my side, I'd just like to thank you all for your participation and your contribution in terms of the questions. I really appreciate that. And of course, if you resonate with any of the ideas that have been put forward, then please feel free to engage. Our contacts are available and will be in the material that is distributed, just to reinforce the points that I was making earlier. And of course, we have a risks website. Risk Group has a website. They support us as our business partner in terms of training and development of software. And then, of course, Winley International Certification Services has a website as well that you can visit. And there's a lot of useful information there. Also, in terms of YouTube videos that we've made to develop competence and understanding around these different topics, and blog posts as well that you can download. Thank you. Thanks, Richard, for your facilitation and offering me the opportunity to speak.
Tony, there's been we have 1 more minute, and I see a few more questions have come through as you did the conclusion. Just a question from Pretty. She wants to ask about opportunities for improvement. Are they supposed to be on the NCR register?
The standard does not demand a specific way of reflecting the opportunities. Remember that an opportunity in the English language, so depending on which standard you're working with, only one of them actually defines what an opportunity is. The 45,001 defines an opportunity in the way that we're looking for continual improvement. Okay, performance improvement is achieved by looking for opportunities. Otherwise, we're simply looking for a circumstance that makes something possible, that is favorable or achieves a favorable outcome. So how you record that, how you deal with it, how you plan to act on it is entirely up to the organization. It does not have to be in your NCRs or on an NCR register. That's not the only way that we can deal with opportunities. It is a way, and certainly you could choose to use it as a means of doing that, but it's not the only way. And the standard is not specific about any documented information that must be revealed in that regard. So your auditor cannot tell you that you have to use the NCRs to record opportunities. Thank you for
Tony,
your question, Pretty, for both of the questions.
I'm going to be a little bit cheeky on a Friday here, Tony. There's one more question from Adam, and I know we're out of time, but he just asked, should findings from internal auditors be classified as well?
So in terms of 10.2, corrective actions need to be understood for their root cause and addressed using risk-based thinking. So all of the standards adopt this risk-based thinking approach, which means, amongst other things, that you should be prioritizing and focusing on the most important of these failures. So if you found a non-conformity, I would encourage you, it's not a requirement, but I would encourage you to apply risk-based thinking and prioritize in some way. So whether you classify as major or minor, or you use a risk matrix to classify intolerable outcomes or intolerable risks associated with the non-conformity, it is a way of classifying and prioritizing, and that you should be doing. It's part of what is expected throughout all parts of these standards. Irrespective of the requirement, you should be applying risk-based thinking. Thank you for your question.
Right. Thank you, everyone. We are a little bit over time. Should you have any more questions, yeah, feel free to pop us an email. We'll distribute the handout after the session. And feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you to Tony for that insightful session. Right, everyone, have a good day and a good weekend ahead.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rich. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.